Stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, these are issues that we deal with every day. They're all around us: racial tensions, religious differences, same-sex marriage equality arguments. For some people, that may affect us differently. For some people, it may affect them daily multiple times. For some of you, it may not be something that happens in your daily life. In my work with diversity education for many years, I find that people are very reluctant to go into an awkward, uncomfortable space. I mean, really nobody likes awkward, uncomfortable spaces. Yet what can happen is something magical at times, is connection. I'm gonna talk about that today. I'm gonna talk about two things. One is multicultural competence, and what I mean by that is the ability and interest to be in that space with people who are different than you. And that it's a lifelong process, learning to love, affirm, and accept people who are different than us. It doesn't happen in one day where today I'm sexist, I go to a little training, and then voila, I'm not anymore. It's a process of self-reflection, hard work, and compassion. And those aren't easy things to do in life. I want to start, the second thing I'm going to talk about today is that the single most effective way to challenge the biases that live within us, within all of us, is one-on-one personal connection. First, I want to tell you a story about my father and about my family. I was raised in Miami, Florida, in a Cuban immigrant family, where I had a lot of other Cuban American friends I grew up with. I was in a majority minority. A lot of my friends and I heard stories from aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents about the loss, the grief stories of having to leave the island and immigrate. We also got a lot of warmth from a collectivistic culture that is one of my biggest prides in life, is being Cuban American. I love it. I'm very prideful of that. One of my friends that I grew up with, his name is Paul. And Paul and I lived on the same block. We went to the same school. We spent a lot of time together. We practiced all the time to be solid gold dancers. I don't know if some, sounds like you know what that means. We thought we were gonna be on solid gold, but anyway. So one day my father comes to me and he says, "You can't play with Paul anymore." And that day changed my life. I was angry, I was confused. He said, "Paul's gonna be gay, his mother makes him do the dishes." And I remember in that moment feeling something that's very hard for me to understand what it is even today. But I know that I became the voice of people that live in the margins, both personally and professionally, and I was ostracized by people in my family as a teenager for speaking up, for Black people, for people with disabilities. They didn't understand what that passion was within, but I knew at 9 that it wasn't right. My father's a different man today, and I want to share a part of his evolution with you as I go through my talk. So first, I want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of multiculturalism. Every single person is a multicultural being. We all have different identities that intersect. Some might be more salient than others. It just kind of depends. Some of that depends, though, if your identity has social power and value, or if it has less. And that usually is related to majority-minority issues. And that's really important. So take me. I'm a large Latina lesbian woman. I've always been a big girl, probably always be a big girl. Prefer to see myself as strong. And I've had some privileges related to these identities. I've also had some moments of a lot of discrimination. Related to my size, in my early 20s, I had some issues and I went to several physicians. And I went to one and he said, "So basically, young lady, you're here because you're fat as a horse and bleeding like a pig." Man, if I had the inner strength that I have right now and what I might have said to that man that day, I'm not so sure I would have leaned into a big connection with him in that moment, but either way. Related to my Latina identity, I know I have skin tone privilege compared to other people in the world as a Latina, as a light-skinned Latina. And people sometimes are like, "I know you're not white, but what are you? Greek, Italian, Arab?" Like, trying to guess. Rarely does someone say she must be Cuban. I've also had some prejudices. One of the stories that sticks out the most is I gave a talk many years ago, and this man, he was so sweet. He came up to me and he's like, "Ma'am, you're the smartest Hispanic I've ever met." So you're like, okay. I knew he meant, that was such a compliment for him. And I don't know what his lived experience was with Hispanics or Latinos. Related to my queer identity, when I first moved to Texas from Florida, my family was concerned that I was going to get killed in Texas because I was gay and Cuban. I'm still here. It's good. And I was called dyke many times in this town. I was called dyke many times, driving my car that had a little rainbow sticker. So that's to say that, people have negative ideas about some people, about different groups. They could also have some positive ones. So when I work as a psychotherapist with people, I a lot of times ask about their emotional classrooms, because we're working on their emotions, right? And the issues they're having, relationship concerns. And so I ask them many times, how did the people in your life deal with their emotions? How did they talk about life? What did they do? Well, it's very similar with your multicultural classroom. Why do you believe what you believe? And it's important, that part of self-reflection for multicultural competence, it's important to think, why do I believe? Who are my teachers? What did they say? That's a really important piece of this. So I have this picture up here in terms of my mother you're able to hold sometimes positive and negative reflections of one group. My mother had a lot of gay male friends, and she loved them, she was connected to them. Around 20 years old, we were walking her dogs, and she turns to me and she said, "Look, I think you're gay. Can you just tell me if you are or not?" Quite a coming out story. And I said, "Yes." Whoa. And she cried and she said, "I love you, I support you. Gay people suffer though. My friends, I know how much they've suffered." Within 30 seconds, this feisty Cuban lady says to me, "But you better not cut your hair short and wear blazers like a big old lesbian." We can laugh about it now and it's funny, but she was right there holding, right? The space in between if she had positive and negative associations with gay people. And she was able to hold that because of our connection, right? So she leaned into this conversation. She moved in, she didn't say, "I'm out." She asked me and she stepped up. I want to talk a little bit about, briefly, in terms of how we're set up to sometimes create an us and them environment neuroscientifically. First, we are so hardwired in the brain to connect. Think about it. When you're connecting with someone, you feel so good. You're like, yes, they see me, I see them, I feel so good. Moved into this relationship, into this connection. We're also hardwired to belong, which happens a little bit earlier in life. This can contradict this in that in-group sense of belongingness, it's us. And then there's a potential for disconnection from other groups. And some of that is just implicit and unconscious. And the more privileges we have, the less we have to think about that. The most important neuroscientific finding I want to share with you today is about social pain. What we know, and it's really an interesting finding, is that the same part of the brain that is stimulated when there's physical pain to the body is the same that is social pain and social exclusion. And social exclusion is not reserved only for minorities. Think about the grade school sitting in terms of two coaches say, "Hey, we have two captains, we're gonna pick teams." And there's that kid that's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna get picked again." Social exclusion, it hurts the brain. Not being invited to a party, all your friends are invited, and you don't have to be 13, you could be 50 and feel some feelings about not being invited to a party that all your friends are. Social exclusion, it hurts the brain. We already cause so much pain to each other as human beings. And so I'm inviting you to lean in and not say, "I'm out. I'd rather stay with my group." So, a lot of what I see sometimes is people say, "But I'm colorblind. My parents taught me to love everyone. I'm a good person." Yeah, you're a good person, but you know what? You may be a good person that says something super offensive unknowingly. And I want to gift you with my compassion. And I want you to have compassion for yourself, that your intention was not bad. Your intention was not bad. However, it can make an impact. And how can we be in the both and of that? How can you be in a space where, man, I recognize I'm so sorry. That's true. That's really important. Recently, I pride myself in catching my biases before they escape my mouth. And even when I have the thought, I'm like, ugh, I feel bad about it because I've been doing this for a long time. None of us are immune to this. Recently, I was in a writing group and a woman said something about being married and having kids. And a few weeks later, I was in a small group with her. And I said, yeah, something, your partner, your husband. She said, I'm married to a woman. I was shocked. I moved into a conversation with her and I said, I'm really sorry. I know I made an impact on you. So that's important to think about, is that even though you have good intention, you can make an impact. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person or a racist, but you might have said something racist or homophobic or sizist or ableist, all of those things. So to wrap up, 3 things you can do. One is admit that you might have these biases. Defensiveness is the first thing that comes up. People are like, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. Blah, blah, blah. There's all this like, no way. We get so defensive. Admit that you are a human being that has biases, and it just is what it is. And it's hard to admit. Second is put yourself around people who are different than you. Whether it's magical or not, I don't know if the magic will happen, but connection can, and sometimes connection is magical. That's really important. That's why study abroad works. Study abroad works because people go to a different place and they're like, whoa, mind blown. My life is so different, or privileged, or whatever the comparison is. Third, and most importantly in this, is move in and stop saying I'm out. Move in and stop saying I'm out. Vulnerability threshold. Like, it's so exciting when we're like, I'm fearful. I'm fearful whether it's something physical or emotional. There's like, if you could just pop over that, it's like, it can be so exciting, that connection. If you can just be a little vulnerable and not be so scared and say I'm out. To wrap up, I want to share a story. Christmas 2012, my little Juven family in Texas, my parents traveled for Christmas and Hanukkah. We had a big Cuban dinner Christmas Eve, and we were sitting around and it was freezing outside. It was icy, and let me tell you, this island man, my father, was not happy, and he spent most of the time inside the whole week. But we were talking around the table about what we loved about our last year, and he said, sobbing, he said, I have never felt this much warmth in my life, being here with you and your family. And I love you all so much. So I can't imagine if my father had not moved in and gotten out of his comfort zone. And he said, I'm in, and there he is walking me down the aisle. So I encourage you, just move in. Thank you for listening.